Hi all. I'm just going to do a really quick video about this topic, finding and choosing a secondary school. And I'm doing it because I feel like there's a lot of confusion and uncertainty about it. And if you are a mainstream person, it's pretty straightforward, although not quite as good as you might think. Anyway, before I get going, couple of disclaimers, just some general information. I don't know anything about your situation, so can't give you any advice. Focusing on the mainstream, if you're a special case, you have to look into it. I'm going to tell you about my experience and knowledge of the system in Buckinghamshire. It possibly applies in your area, but it might not, so you need to check. And because it's Buckinghamshire, there is some discussion of grammar schools and how that's affected. Okay, let's crack on. The overall process. The most important thing is your address, believe it or not. So although there's a lot of talk about parents having a choice, in reality, your address, where your house is going to drive an enormous amount of where your son or daughter ends up going to secondary school. Now, that might frustrate you, that might be annoying, but it's a fact. Second thing to mention is regarding the 11 plus, your son or daughter will do the 11 plus in the first few weeks of year 6. You'll get the results in about November. At least this is how I remember the process. Now, that's going to be a pass or a fail. It doesn't matter. There's a whole bunch of things we could say about the 11 plus, but it doesn't really matter if they got a very high score or if they got a very low score. It doesn't matter. They're either in the grammar school system or they are not. So that is that. It does not affect your school choice, apart from being one or the other. Then once you know the results, you submit preferences. I seem to remember that's sort of around February, March time that you can do that. And then finally, the local authority, Buckinghamshire County Council, will allocate your child to a school. So how do they allocate? So there's two main questions here, actually. How do they allocate the school, and how do you decide on a school if you have a choice? Let's talk first of all about what schools are going to do to select pupils. So firstly, schools will either have their own policy or they will follow the county policy. You need to check. How the policies work are there are a set of rules, and normally they go from, let's say, 1 to 10. If your child falls in rule 1, you get a place. All of the children that that are affected by rule 1 are dealt with first. Then rule 2 is dealt with. Then rule 3 is dealt with. So, for example, normally about rule 2 or 3, the school will say children who already have a sibling at the school. In other words, they will not deal with any other applicants until all of the children who have a sibling at the school have been considered. Now, that's not to say 100% of those will get a place. I think it would be highly unusual if they didn't. But the point is, there are groups of students who are dealt with in order. This is an important point when we come back to catchment. The second general point to consider is schools have a fixed number of places. So what's happening is, just for example, they've got 100 places available. As they go through each one of these groups in their admissions policy, they will start allocating places. So, for example, I think there's nearly always a group which are subject to a court order. So if a court orders a child to go to a certain school, well, they'll get one of the places. So now we're dealing with 99 places. Say 10 of the applicants have a sibling. Well, now we're dealing with 89 places. You get the point. They have a fixed number of places, and as they work down the groups, the number of the places go down and down and down until they get to your child. Now, how do they select you? Well, it's really boring. They just measure the distance, normally as the crow flies, from your front door to the front door of the school. Now, there are such a thing as catchment areas. They don't always exist, so you're going to need to check. But in a catchment area, there is a two-step process. In other words, they'll say, we will, just as I said about students with siblings, we will deal with all of the applicants who are inside the catchment area first, and if we haven't handed out all of our places, we will continue to the next group. This is exactly the same as all of the other admissions groups. Everything goes down in a logical order. So now, of course, I've already said about the 11 plus results, so I don't need to go about that. So your first question is, where are my nearest schools? What is the distance? Now, in Buckinghamshire has a website. I think pretty much every county council has a website. So I've put in a postcode here, and what happens is you press a button and it tells you the schools in order of distance. So here on the screen, this school is 2.1 miles away from this postcode. The next nearest school is 2.93 miles away. The next nearest school is 4.4 miles away. All very interesting. However, it doesn't actually help you. What you really need to know is this little piece of information down here, which is, firstly, this doesn't really matter. It says based on the postcode, you are outside of the catchment. Okay, so you're just in a second group. For 2024, so that was the year before, at year 7, applicants outside of catchment, i.e. people like you, were offered a place up to 4.243 miles. In other words, the very last student, the 100th student to be offered a place at this school last year lived 4.243 miles away. You live, or this person, this example, lives 4.44 miles away. So if, and it is hypothetical, if you applied in 2024, you would not have got a place at the Beaconsfield School because there were people who were nearer to the school. That's it. People in your category, that's to say outside of catchment, got the places before you did because they lived closer. Now, some schools have different distances because some schools are more popular than others. Let's look at this one. This is a grammar school, Dr. Challoner's High School. It's actually a girls' school. So this one is the distance this person lives away is 5.83 miles. And firstly, you are within the catchment area, so you're in the category of catchment of applicants. And at year 7, all applicants in catchment were offered a place. So it doesn't matter how far away you are. If you were in the catchment, you were offered a place. Now, what it's not telling us is how far away if you were outside of catchment. I could try that out if I put in something else, but I'm trying to find a different example. If we look at a different school, here we go. This is a much more interesting example. Dr. Challoner's Grammar School is a boys' school. This one, this person is 6.94 miles away, and last year people in catchment were offered a place to distance of 5.76 miles. So it's really important that you know living in the catchment area does not mean you are guaranteed a place. All it means is you are considered before people who are outside the catchment area. There's another school here. By the way, in a minute when I show you the school results, you'll see why Dr. Challoner's grammar school wasn't able to offer places. Now here's a different example. This one is you live 6.22 miles away. For 2024, Year 7 applicants outside of catchment were offered a place of up to a distance of 8.869 miles. So these people, so obviously 100% of people inside the catchment were offered a place because they don't move on to outside the catchment until all of those have been fulfilled. And 8.869 miles, that's quite a long way away. So you can see that this school is less in demand, really. Okay, so let's... So you can see how the distance... Now, just one thing to point out. What happened in 2024 doesn't necessarily need to happen in 2025. Knowing the distance away and knowing... So, for example, here, if you applied in 2024, you would have got a place in Amersham School. But you really don't know whether this will change next year, and you may not get a place based on the distance. You just don't know. Now, I would say probably history is a good indicator of what's going on, but you just don't know. So remember, I think the key points here are being in the catchment area does not mean you are going to get a place. It just means that your application will be considered first. And what that means is your distance to the school will be considered before other people's. Now, let's go to the part which is, how do you select the school that you're interested in? So firstly, I just want to remind you, you can't really choose the school very well because it's limited by where you lived. But I want to show you the school's data. Now, a lot of people I hear talking about Ofsted ratings. The Secretary of State for Education has recently announced that with immediate effect, one-word ratings for schools are going to be scrapped. And that's because it's sort of interesting to know what the Ofsted rating is, but there are so many things going on in a school, it's really impossible to tell anything meaningful from a one-word rating. Of course, schools with higher ratings would, one imagine, generally be better, but it just doesn't tell you very much. Now, personally, I like data, so I'm going to show you some data, but this is to me, is the only way which you can make a well-informed choice. Okay, so let's have a look at how you might do that. So if you don't know the names of the schools you're interested in, what you can do is you can type in the name of your town here. This is, by the way, this is a government website, so this applies to every single school in the country. And you can say, I live in this town, I'm interested in secondary schools and within a radius of so many miles. Let's keep it to 3 because there's so many anyway. Now the other thing is, you will find there's some ways to filter the schools. So if you live in an area with a lot of schools or you're looking for something specific. Now, independent schools, what that means is private schools, schools that you pay for. So I'm going to assume that we're not interested in those. So what you can do is go along and actually let's just... let's pick academies, and I think that will do. And see here, Amersham School is on the list. I'm going to add it to my schools list. Now, I've already added quite a few, as you can see, to my list in advance. So let's have a look at my schools list. So once you add them to the list, you get this little link up here on the top right that says My Schools. Now, for some of you, this is going to look like a lot of numbers and data, but I hope if I explain this, it's going to make sense. So the first thing is the government generally recommends looking at a thing called Progress 8. Now, I think this is probably a good idea. The problem with this Progress 8 score, it's really hard to understand. So the problem with it is it's quite hard. But let me try to explain it in simple terms. Different schools get different pupils. So imagine if I had a school where I only accepted the absolute smartest of schools, which is smartest of pupils, which is exactly the case in the case of a grammar school. They only take kids who have passed 11 plus. So because they have more talented students to start with, their results are going to be better. So if I compare their results, let me show you. So here, Dr. Challoner's Grammar School has, for example, the percentage of pupils who achieved grade 5, so that's a pass, who passed English and maths is 99%. So nearly all of the pupils at that school passed English and maths. However, if you compare it to a school which is not a grammar school, and by the way, Ruislip High School has a mixed intake, so there is no test at all, you can see 55% have achieved English and maths. Now maybe that doesn't tell us anything about the school because, well, if I take the smartest kids, of course they're going to get the best results. So what the government says is, let's have a look at the progress that the pupils made. In other words, if I looked at your son or daughter at age 11 and gave them a test, and then at age 16 and gave them another test, how much better did they get? Now, of course, they got a lot better because they went up from 11 to 16. But did they get better more than the average child in England? Now, in Ruislip High School, they did. They did well above average. So, although the kids going to Ruislip High School were not as smart as the kids going to Dr. Challoner's, they actually improved a lot more above average. By the way, they didn't improve as much as the kids who went to Dr. Challoner's. They improved a lot, but that's a different point. And you can see at Amersham School, they improved, but not quite as much as at Ruislip, and so on and so on. Now you can see some schools, look at Hayden's School. These kids actually improved, but they didn't improve even as much as the average across all of England. Now, the other thing that's interesting here, by the way, is you can see the average for England state-funded schools. So here, 45% of kids on average are leaving school with an English and Maths GCSE, which, by the way, I think is absolutely appalling. The majority of kids leave school without an English and Maths GCSEs in England. Absolutely dreadful. Okay, so that was Progress 8. The government's own video, which I watched earlier, says that really the highest score you can get on Progress 8 is 1. So both Dr. Challoner's, the girls and the boys' schools, are way above what is considered even very good performance by the government. Chesham Grammar School is still very high indeed. Ruislip High School, still well above average, well above average. So that's the Progress 8 score. I've already talked about grade 5 or above. Now, Attainment 8 is if you consider that your child will probably do at least 8 GCSEs, the government takes the most important GCSEs, puts them into a mathematical pot, and then allocates a score. Now, this is not compared to anything, so it's the raw score. How well did these pupils do when you look at the 8 main GCSEs? So they take into account maths, English, science, one language, etc., etc. Now, I can't tell you what that number actually means, but I can tell you that this is one of the best schools in the country. So 77.5 is a very, very high score indeed. If you look at what is considered a good, normal, non-selective school, the Attainment 8 score is 53.8, and at a school that is not that good, the Attainment 8 score is 49.6. Now, the other thing that you may find interesting is the number of pupils, because you may be more interested in a bigger or smaller school. Generally, people prefer smaller schools, but on the other hand, most secondary schools are quite large. You can see here, Hayden School, 271. It's a really big school, and it's not performing very well, is it? So I think that's all of the information. So just going back to how you select a school, I would say once you have decided on softer factors, so for example, where is the school? Is there something special about the school that particularly suits your child? For example, are they sporty? Are they musical? Does it specialise in something that you are interested in? Does it relate? Is it a faith school? All of those things, that's all up to you. But if you're looking at the government performance information, then probably the most important thing is to look at Progress 8. It is hard to understand. Higher is better, and you can compare all of the schools in your borough really easily. Okay, I think that's everything that I was going to say. Good luck with your choices. Bye for now.